Commander Velthor sat alone in the dark corner of the space station cantina. His thick, scaly skin showed many old battle wounds. 6 yellow eyes stared into his drink, while 3 arms held the glass steady. The 4th arm tapped nervously on the metal table. The cantina was quiet tonight. Most aliens avoided this place because they knew Velthor came here to drink and remember. The old Krinth warrior had fought in more battles than anyone could count, but there was one war that made him wake up screaming every night. Young Lieutenant Zaxamor walked slowly toward the table. His scales were still bright green, showing he had never seen real combat. The lieutenant had heard stories about Commander Veltar. Everyone in the Krinth Empire knew his name. But tonight, Zaxamor needed to know the truth about something that scared every alien in the galaxy. "Commander," Zaxamor said quietly, "may I sit with you?" Velthor looked up with tired eyes. "What do you want, boy? I heard you fought against the humans during the border wars. The other soldiers say terrible things about them. They say humans are monsters who cannot be killed. They say humans eat their enemies and use the bones as weapons." Velthor made. "I sound like laughing, but there was no joy in it." "Sit down, Lieutenant. You want to know about humans. I will tell you. But first, let me ask you something. What do you think makes a good warrior?" Zaxamor thought for a moment. "Strength, good weapons, smart battle plans. Those things help," Velthar said. "But the best warriors have something else. They have the will to do anything to win. Anything at all. No matter how terrible it might be." The old commander took a long drink and continued. 20 years ago, the Krinth Empire was strong. We had conquered 47 worlds. Our weapons could destroy entire cities. Our soldiers were the best trained in the galaxy. When we found the humans, we thought they would be easy to defeat. But they were not. Zaxamor asked. "Easy?" Velthor laughed again. "Boy, fighting humans is like fighting death itself. They do not just want to win battles. They want to make sure that anyone who fights them never wants to fight again." The commander's voice became quiet. "The first time I saw humans fight was at a small mining colony called Kepler 45-C. My reports said there were only 300 human soldiers defending it. I had 2,000 of the best Krinth warriors in the Empire. The battle should have lasted 1 day. How long did it actually last?" 6 months, Velthar said. 6 months of the most terrible fighting I have ever seen. And we lost. Zaxamor's eyes grew wide. 2,000 elite soldiers lost to 300 humans. "That is when I learned the first rule about humans," Velthar explained. "They do not fight fair. They do not follow the normal rules of war. When we surrounded their colony and demanded they surrender, their commander sent us a message." The old warrior paused to drink again. His hands were shaking slightly now. The human commander was a female named Sora Kim. She was small, maybe half my size. When I told her to surrender or die, she laughed. Then she said something I will never forget. "What did she say?" "She said, 'We choose option 3. Then she sent us the exact location of her command center and told us to come and try to take it. Velthor stared into his drink. We thought she was crazy. Or maybe she was trying to trick us. But when we got to those coordinates, we found something impossible. What was there? Nothing, the commander said. The building was empty, but the walls, the floors, the ceiling, everything was covered with explosives. And there was a recording device playing her voice over and over. She was counting down from 100. What happened when she reached 0? Half my army disappeared. Velthar whispered. The explosion was so big it could be seen from space. But that was not the worst part. Zaxamor waited for his commander to continue. The worst part was that we found out later she was never in that building. The whole thing was a trap. While we were attacking an empty building, she and her soldiers were behind us, destroying our ships and cutting off our escape route. The lieutenant felt cold fear creeping up his spine. How did they know you would attack that building? Because humans study their enemies like scientists study insects, Velthor explained. They watch how we think, how we move, what we fear. Then they use all of that against us. The old commander finished his drink and looked directly at the young soldier. That was just the beginning. Lieutenant, over the next 6 months, those 300 humans killed more than 1,500 of my warriors. And they did it by being smarter, meaner, and more willing to die than any species I had ever fought. But surely our superior weapons mean nothing when your enemy turns everything into a weapon, Velthar interrupted. Humans made weapons out of their own dead bodies. They made weapons out of their food, their medicine, even their children's toys. By the end, my soldiers were afraid to touch anything in that colony because it might explode. The cantina grew even quieter as other aliens noticed the fear in the old warrior's voice. That was when I learned the most important thing about humans. Velthor said quietly, they are not monsters. Monsters can be killed. Humans are something much worse. They are survivors who have learned that the only way to survive is to make sure their enemies never want to fight them again. Velthar poured another drink with shaking hands. The memory of that first battle still made his scales turn pale with fear. Lieutenant Zaxamor leaned forward, wanting to hear more but afraid of what he might learn. The human commander Sora Kim was different from any enemy I had ever faced. Velthor continued. Most species fight to protect their homes and families. Humans fight to teach lessons. Very painful lessons. The old warrior stared at the wall, seeing ghosts from 20 years ago. After the first explosion, we thought we understood their tricks. We were wrong. The humans had spent months preparing for our attack. Every street, every building, every piece of metal had been turned into a weapon. How is that possible? Zaximor asked. Humans think differently than we do, Velthor explained. When most species prepare for battle, they gather weapons and build walls. Humans look at everything around them and ask one question: how can this kill my enemy? The commander's voice grew quieter. There was a human soldier named Huck who worked at their water treatment plant. Smart boy, maybe 20 years old. When we needed fresh water for our troops, we thought the water plant would be safe to capture. It was not safe. Huck had spent 2 months filling the entire building with explosive gas, Velthor said, but he did not just blow it up. When we got close, he waited until 50% of my best soldiers went inside to drink the water. Then he sent them a radio message. What did he say? He said, "Thank you for visiting our water plant. Please enjoy your last drink." Then the entire building disappeared in a ball of fire. So hot it melted the metal on our vehicles half a kilometer away. Zaximor felt sick to his stomach. He killed himself just to kill 50 soldiers. That is another thing about humans, Velthor nodded. They do not fear death the way we do. They fear losing more than they fear dying. Huck could have run away and lived. Instead, he chose to die in a way that would scare us. The old commander took a long drink before continuing. But the worst part was not the soldiers who died in the explosion. The worst part was what we found afterward. What did you find? Hughes had left a recording for us. He explained exactly how he built the bomb, how long he had planned it, and how many more traps like it were waiting for us around the colony. Then he said something that made my bravest warriors want to go home. What did he say? Velthor's voice became very quiet. He said, "We have been planning this for 6 months. We know everything about your ships, your weapons, your battle tactics. We know the names of your commanders and the names of your children back home. We are not fighting to win this battle. We are fighting to make sure that every Krinthu survives, goes home and tells their people what happens when you attack humans." The lieutenant's scales turned pale. They were planning to lose. No, Velthor shook his head. They were planning to win by making victory so terrible for us that we would never want to fight them again. And it worked. The commander continued his story. There was a human medic, named Mira, who worked at their hospital. Small female, very young, always smiling. When our forces surrounded the hospital, she came out with her hands up like she wanted to surrender. Did she surrender? She walked right up to our commander and said she wanted to help treat our wounded soldiers. She said humans believe in helping sick people, even enemies. My commander thought this was a good sign. Maybe the humans were finally ready to give up. Velthor paused to steady his voice. Myra spent 3 days taking care of our wounded. She was kind and gentle. She brought them food and medicine. Our soldiers started to think that maybe humans were not so bad after all. What happened then? On the 4th day, Myra asked if she could say goodbye to the human wounded in the hospital. Our commander said yes, thinking she was going to tell them to surrender. Instead, she walked into the hospital and pulled a pin from a grenade she had hidden in her medical bag. Zaximor gasped. She killed her own wounded soldiers. No, Velthor said sadly. The human wounded were already dead. They had been dead for days, but Mira had been using their bodies to hide enough explosives to destroy the entire hospital and every Krint soldier inside it. The old warrior's voice was barely a whisper now. Before she died, she sent us one last message. She said, "Every human who dies fighting, you will take 10 of you with them. Remember this when you go home to your families." "That is horrible," Zaximor said. "It gets worse," Velthor continued. "We found out later that every human in the colony had volunteered for suicide missions, even the children. There was a 10-year-old human girl named Nari who crawled through air vents for a week, placing small bombs in our supply trucks. When we finally caught her, she looked at us and said, 'My daddy taught me that some things are more important than being alive.'" The lieutenant sat in shocked silence. "That was when I realized we were not fighting soldiers," Velthor finished. "We were fighting an entire species that had decided death was better than defeat. And that, Lieutenant, is the most dangerous enemy in the universe." Velthor's hands stopped shaking as he reached the darkest part of his memory. The cantina seemed to grow colder as he spoke. Even the other aliens at nearby tables had stopped talking to listen to his terrible story. "After we lost at Kepler 45 to C, the Krinth High Command was very angry," Velthor said slowly. "They could not believe that 300 humans had defeated 2,000 of our best warriors. So they decided to show the galaxy what happens when you embarrass the Krinth Empire." Lieutenant Zaximor waited quietly. He could see the pain in his commander's 6 eyes. "They sent the entire 9th Battle Fleet to attack Titan's Gate," Velthor continued. 3,000 ships, 200,000 soldiers. The biggest military force the Krinth Empire had ever assembled. All to destroy one human base. How many Humans were defending it. 12,000, Velthar said, led by a human general named Quan Park. Intelligence told us he was an old soldier, maybe 60 years old. We thought it would be easy to defeat an old man and his small army. The old commander poured another drink. His voice became very quiet. We surrounded the entire star system. No ships could get in or out. No messages could be sent. We cut off all their food and supplies. Then we sent General Park a message, demanding he surrender. What did he say? He sent back a picture, Velthar said. It was a photo of him sitting at his desk, drinking coffee and reading a book. Under the picture were written 3 words, "Come and take it." Zaxamor frowned. That is all. That is all. But we found out later that those 3 words were very important to humans. They have used them in many wars throughout their history. It means they would rather die fighting than live as prisoners. Velthor took a long drink before continuing. We expected the siege to last maybe 1 month. 12,000 soldiers cannot fight 200,000 forever. We were very wrong. How long did it actually last? 18 months. The commander whispered, 18 months of the most terrible fighting any species has ever seen. And by the end, we were the ones begging for mercy. The lieutenant's scales turned white with fear. What did they do? Everything, Velthar said. Humans do not just fight battles, they turn war itself into an art form. General Park had spent years preparing Titan's Gate for siege. Every room, every hallway, every piece of equipment had been turned into a weapon. The old warrior stared into his drink. There was a human engineer named Shin who worked in their air recycling system. Very smart boy, always fixing things and making them work better. When we finally broke through their outer defenses, we thought we had won, but you had not. Shin had rewired the entire air system to pump poison gas instead of clean air via, explained, but he was clever about it. He did not kill us right away. He made us sick slowly, so we would suffer for days before dying. That is cruel. It gets worse, the commander continued. Shin left recordings for us to find. In the recordings, he explained exactly how the poison worked and how long we had to live. Then he offered to give us the antidote if we retreated from the base. Zaxamor leaned forward. Did you retreat? Some of my soldiers wanted to, but our pride would not let us. Shin activated the second part of his plan. What was the second part? He had also poisoned our food supplies, our water, even the air in our ships, Velthar said quietly. Somehow, human infiltrators had been sneaking onto our vessels for months, slowly contaminating everything we needed to survive. The lieutenant felt sick. How many soldiers did you lose? Thousands, Velthar whispered. But the dying was not the worst part. The worst part was the fear. Every time we ate food or drank water, we wondered if today would be the day we started to die. Sleep became impossible. My soldiers were jumping at shadows. What about the human civilians? Surely they suffered too. Velthar's laugh was bitter and cold. That was when we learned another terrible truth about humans. There were no civilians at Titan's Gate. Everyone on that base, from the oldest grandfather to the youngest child, was a soldier. Even the children, especially the children, the commander said. There was a human girl named Gia, maybe 12 years old. She looked sweet and innocent. When we captured her, she cried and begged us not to hurt her. What happened? We felt sorry for her. Some of my soldiers even gave her food and toys. She seemed so scared and helpless. Then one night, she disappeared from her cell. Velthar's voice became very quiet. We found her 3 days later, in our weapons storage room. She had spent those 3 days learning how our guns worked. Then she reprogrammed them so they would explode when fired instead of shooting. She was a centaur. The crying and begging was all an act. Velthor nodded. Gia had volunteered for the mission. Her parents had trained her to act helpless, so we would lower our guard. When we found her, she was not scared anymore. She looked at us and said, "My mom taught me that the best weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming." The old commander finished his drink. That was when I realized we were not fighting an army. We were fighting an entire civilization that had turned every man, woman, and child into a weapon of war. Velthor's voice became so quiet that Lieutenant Zaxamor had to lean closer to hear him. The old commander's 6 eyes stared at nothing, lost in memories that still made him wake up screaming 20 years later. After 18 months of siege, we finally broke through the last human defenses at Titan's Gate. Velthar said slowly. My soldiers were cheering. We thought we had won the greatest victory in Krinth history. We were fools. The lieutenant waited patiently. He could see that his commander was struggling to find the words for what came next. General Quan Park was waiting for us in the command center, Velthor continued. He was sitting at his desk, just like in the picture he had sent us at the beginning of the siege, still drinking coffee, still reading a book. He looked up at us and smiled. He was not afraid. That smile was the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. The old warrior whispered. It was not the smile of a defeated man. It was the smile of someone who had planned everything perfectly and was about to show us his final trick. Velthor took a shaky drink before continuing. General Park stood up and walked to a red button on the wall. He looked at me and said, "Thank you for coming all this way to learn an important lesson about humanity." "What lesson?" he said. "We never surrender, we never negotiate, and we never let our enemies feel safe again." Then he pushed the button. The commander paused for a long moment. His scales had turned completely pale with the memory. At first, nothing happened. Then alarms started going off all over the base. A female voice came over the speakers. It was Captain Erin Lee, the base's intelligence officer. She sounded very calm and professional. What did she say? She said, "Attention Krinth forces. You have 30 seconds to pray to whatever gods you believe in. Protocol 0 is now active. Thank you for teaching us so much about your weaknesses." Zack felt cold fear creeping up his spine. What was Protocol 0? We found out later that the humans had been planning it for the entire 18 months, Velthor explained. While we were fighting to capture the base, they were preparing to destroy it in a way that would hurt us far worse than any military defeat. How could destroying their own base hurt you? Because they were not just destroying the base, the old warrior said quietly. They were destroying our future. Velthor's voice became barely a whisper. General Park had spent the entire siege learning everything about us. Our ship designs, our battle tactics, our weapons, even personal information about our commanders and their families back home. How did he learn all that? Every Krinth soldier who died during the siege, every ship we lost, every piece of equipment we abandoned. The humans studied all of it, the commander explained. They dissected our technology like scientists studying insects. They recorded our radio communications. They even tortured some of our captured soldiers for information. The lieutenant's eyes grew wide with horror. That is against the laws of war. Humans do not follow our laws, Velthor said simply. They follow their own laws. And their laws say that anyone who threatens human civilians deserves no mercy at all. What happened when General Park pushed the button? The entire planet exploded. The commander whispered, but just before it exploded, Captain Erin transmitted everything they had learned about us to every human settlement in the galaxy. Velthor's hands were shaking again. The transmission included detailed plans of our ships, maps of our home, world's personal files on every Krinth commander, and something much worse. What could be worse than that? A complete psychological profile of our species. The old warrior said, the humans had spent 18 months studying how we think, what we fear, how we react under pressure. They learned things about us that we did not even know about ourselves. Why was that so dangerous? Because knowledge is the deadliest weapon of all, Velthor explained. Within days of the transmission, human strike forces began attacking our supply lines using tactics specifically designed to cause maximum psychological damage to Krinth soldiers. The commander's voice became hollow with memory. They knew exactly what would scare us most. They knew that Krinth warriors fear dishonor more than death, so they did not try to kill us quickly. Instead, they made us look like cowards in front of our own people. How a human named Minjin lead raids against our communication arrays, Velthor said, but instead of destroying them, he used them to broadcast videos throughout the Krinth Empire. Videos of human children fighting our elite soldiers. Videos of our warriors running away in fear. Videos of General Park's final message. What was the final message? General Park looked directly into the camera and said, "We are sending this message to every species in the galaxy. This is what happens when you attack human civilians. We do not just defeat our enemies, we make sure they never want to fight again. And we make sure everyone knows what cowards they really are." Velth finished his drink with shaking hands. That explosion at Titan's Gate killed 400,000 Krinth soldiers and destroyed our entire 9th battle fleet. But the real damage was to our pride. We had been humiliated by a species we thought was primitive and weak. Surely that was the end of the war. The old commander looked at his young lieutenant with sad, tired eyes. No, boy, that was when the war really began. Velthor stared at his empty glass for a long time before speaking again. The cantina had become completely silent. Every alien in the room was listening to the old warrior's story, and none of them liked what they were hearing. After Titan's Gate, I did something that changed my life forever, Velthor said quietly. I decided to study the humans. I wanted to understand how such a small, weak species could defeat the mighty Krinth Empire. Lieutenant Zaxamor shifted uncomfortably in his chair. What did you learn, Commander? I learned that we had made a terrible mistake, the old warrior replied. We thought the humans at Titan's Gate were fighting desperately because they were trapped. We thought they were using cruel tactics because they were weak. We were wrong about everything. Velthor's voice became very serious. A human intelligence officer named Jiho contacted me after the war ended. He said he wanted to show me something that would help me understand what had really happened. What did he show you? He sent me recordings of human wars throughout their history, the commander said slowly. Wars, they had fought against each other for thousands of years, and what I saw in those recordings made me realize that everything they had done to us was actually them being kind. The lieutenant's scales turned pale. Kind. The siege tactics they used at Titan's Gate, the psychological warfare, the use of their dead as weapons, Humans had been doing these things to each other for thousands of years, Velthar explained, but when they fought us, they held back. How do you know they held back? Because in their wars against each other, humans have done things that make our worst nightmares seem like children's games. The old warrior whispered. They have poisoned entire continents, they have built weapons that can destroy planets. They have fought wars where victory meant making sure their enemies could never exist again. Velthar paused to steady his voice. There was one human war where they dropped weapons that turned entire cities into glass. Another war where they used diseases as weapons, killing millions of their own species just to defeat their enemies. That is impossible. No species would do that to their own kind. Humans are not like other species, the commander said quietly. They do not just fight to win territory or resources. They fight to prove ideas. They will sacrifice everything, including their own lives, to defend what they believe is right. The old warrior's voice became very quiet. Jiho showed me records of a human war that lasted for 6 years. During that war, humans built factories whose only purpose was to kill other humans as efficiently as possible. They turned murder into an industrial process. Why are you telling me this? Zaxomar asked, his voice shaking. Because I want you to understand what we really faced at Titan's Gate, Velthar replied. Those 12,000 humans could have killed every single one of our 200,000 soldiers if they had wanted to. Instead, they chose to teach us a lesson. What kind of lesson? They wanted us to go home and tell other species what happens when you attack humans, the commander explained. They could have followed our retreating ships back to the Krinth homeworld and destroyed our entire civilization. Instead, they let us live. Velthar's voice became filled with a strange kind of respect. A human diplomat named Yoon visited me years later. She explained their philosophy to me. She said, "We do not want to conquer the galaxy. We want the galaxy to leave us alone. So when someone attacks us, we make sure that everyone learns why. That was a mistake. Are you saying we should be grateful they defeated us?" "I am saying we should be grateful we survived," the old warrior said seriously. "After studying their history, I realized that humans have spent thousands of years learning how to fight wars. They have turned warfare itself into a science." The commander looked directly at his young lieutenant. "Do you know what the most frightening thing about humans is? What they are getting better at it," Velthar whispered. "Every war they fight teaches them new ways to defeat their enemies. Every defeat makes them stronger. Every victory makes them more dangerous. But surely they must have limits. They cannot be invincible. That is what every species thinks before they fight humans," the old warrior said sadly. "The humans have a saying, the best way to win a war is to make sure your enemies never want to fight you again, and they have become very good at doing exactly that." Velthar stood up slowly from the table. His old bones creaked with the movement. "I have spent 20 years studying human military history," he said quietly, "and I have learned one very important thing. Humans do not start wars. But when someone else starts a war with them, humans finish it in a way that makes sure it never happens again." The old commander looked around the cantina at all the different alien species sitting at their tables. "Look around you, Lieutenant. See all these different species drinking together peacefully. Do you know why we all get along so well now? Why? Because we all learned the same lesson," Velthar said with a bitter smile. "We learned that fighting humans is the stupidest thing any species can do. So now we cooperate with them instead." He placed a clawed hand on Zaxamar's shoulder. "The humans call it peace through strength, but we know the truth. They have made war itself into their weapon, and the galaxy is safer because they chose to be our protectors instead of our destroyers." As Velthar walked away, he offered one final thought. "Never forget, Lieutenant, humans are not monsters. Monsters can be killed. Humans are something much more dangerous. They are survivors who have learned that the only way to survive is to make sure their enemies never want to fight them again."